we are going to start, and when Denisa comes, she will be presented, okay? So let's see. Oh, welcome. I'm so all over the place. I'm so sorry. Okay, so Tyler will be the one to start. Tyler, if you are able to try to share your PowerPoint while I present you. Yeah, that's fine. Great, thank you. Okay, so we hear you correctly. No, no problem. Okay, so Tyler, a former secondary school teacher from Seattle, Washington, began his academic career in Celtic Studies in 2019 as a part-time distance learner. Over the course of his MA program, University of Wales Trinity St David, he developed interest in both medieval literature and Celtic revival movements. He wrote these topics together. Oh, okay. He brought these topics together in his dissertation, A Misfit Mythology Against Taliesin, I'm so sorry, in English Literature and Culture in the 19th Century, for which he earned a distinction in 2020. He moved to Ireland to complete a postgraduate diploma in Ancient and Medieval Language at the University College Cork and develop skills in Latin, Medieval Welsh, Old Irish, and Paleography. From 2023 to 2025, he worked in UCC as a part-time lecturer in early and medieval Irish and course coordinator for adult education courses in mythology and in heritage and folklore studies. In autumn 2025, he was awarded funding via the Scottish Graduate School for Arts and Humanities, doctoral training partnership to investigate Irish and Scottish revivalist adaptation and reinterpretation of medieval Ulster cycle characters and narrative as a PhD candidate in the University of Edinburgh. So that will be all. Whenever you're ready, you can start.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that introduction. I assume you can see my slides okay?
Yeah, that's great. I forgot to tell you, you have 15 minutes, okay?
Yeah, perfect.
No worries, sorry, my fault.
I'll go ahead and start then. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, political and cultural activism in Britain and Ireland stimulated and was stimulated by networks of writers, dramatists, and artists now known as Celtic revivalists. Strong nativist tendencies compelled revivalists to adapt and promote local traditions, folklore, and medieval literature. Rarely competent in Celtic languages themselves, they tended to access their sources in translation, a point which I'll return to. In Ireland, increasing discontent with British rule prompted revivalists to elevate Ireland as culturally unique and worthy of self-determination. To this end, many writers depicted a pre-colonial past consisting of pristine landscapes and dauntless heroes. As the Irish spirit of rebellion grew, revivalists invoked legendary figures as personifications of an idealized past, aspects of which they hoped to revitalize in their present. I will illustrate this phenomenon today by discussing 3 revivalist stories featuring the phantoms of characters from the medieval Irish Ulster cycle. After contextualizing the cycle, I will summarize 2 stories of phantoms from within that body of literature. Then I will discuss how Samuel Ferguson, Edward Martin, and William Butler Yeats utilized Ulster cycle phantoms to grapple with their contemporary concerns. The Ulster cycle's core narratives were developed initially between about 900 and 1200 in Old and Middle Irish. Most Ulster cycle tales are set in the northern and westernmost provinces of Ulster and Connacht and take place around the 1st century BC. Characters include Cuchulainn, Ulster's mightiest fighter, Medivh, warrior queen of Connacht, and Fergus mac Roig, a foster father to Cuchulainn who goes into exile in Connacht and becomes Medivh's lover. Note that I'm using characters' medieval names here. As already mentioned, most revivalists lacked competence in the local Celtic language, so in this case Irish. This explains how, at this time, names like Cuchulainn get numerous different spellings, Medivh's name becomes anglicized as Maeve, and the name of Cuchulainn's wife, Ever, is reinterpreted as Emer. Many such reinterpretations of these names became popularized during the revival. The tales of a medieval cycle, as described by Eric Poppe, ideally cluster around a common fixed point of reference. In the case of the Ulster cycle, this reference point is the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley. In brief, the Táin is the story of Queen Medivh leading an invasion of Ulster in order to seize the magnificent Round Bull of Cooley. Due to a supernatural debility afflicting the Ulstermen, Cuchulainn is the only warrior capable of defending his entire province. Fergus, ostensibly loyal to Medivh but still retaining affection for his former countrymen in Ulster, attempts to run interference by delaying the Connacht army's advance and de-escalating several key conflicts while still following the letter of Medivh's commands. Both sides ultimately lose more than they gain, but Cuchulain's exploits earn him enduring fame. The cycle also includes the Rev Scala, or 4 stories to the Táin, and various post-Táin continuations, such as the Ádada, or violent deaths of significant characters. Phantoms, in the sense of revenants or ghostly manifestations of the dead, are absent from the cycle with 2 notable exceptions, both of which take place centuries after the events of the cycle proper. One of these, the Finding of the Táin, is sometimes treated as a frame narrative to the Táin itself. It explains how Ireland's tradition bearers realize, to their horror, that they cannot recall the entirety of the story of the Táin. Shenachan Torfeist, Ireland's chief poet, directs a search to recover the story, which his son Mergin succeeds in doing by speaking directly with the phantom of Fergus mac Roig. It is implied in the early version of this tale, and made explicit in a later version, that Shenachan and the other poets write the story down so that it will never be lost again, thereby acknowledging a cultural shift from oral to written tradition. The other text, the Phantom Chariot of Cuchulainn, can be viewed as an epilogue to the cycle. Here, St. Patrick summons the spirit of Cuchulainn to convince an Irish king to convert to Christianity. Cuchulainn's spirit tells the king that despite plying his greatest skills in hell, even he could not best the devil, thus insinuating that Christian forces trump even the most powerful, celebrated beings produced by pre-Christian Ireland. Together, these stories suggest that the Táin should be remembered, but that its glories are strictly confined to the past. Like the phantoms of Fergus and Cuchulainn, the Ulster cycle deserves respect for its place in Irish cultural memory. At the same time, these stories caution their audience not to cling to outdated customs when new, ostensibly better systems become available. The first of the 3 revivalist pieces we are discussing, a verse adaptation of The Finding of the Táin by Samuel Ferguson, focuses not on improving traditional systems, but instead on rehabilitating traditional literature. The Táin Quest, as Ferguson entitled his piece, is the first poem in his 1865 collection, Lays of the Western Gael. Unlike Martin and Yeats, who lacked Irish, Ferguson had some knowledge of the language and even worked with medieval Irish. His main source was probably a 13th century parody of The Finding of the Táin, translated in 1860 in the Transactions of the Ossianic Society, but he must have had access to a manuscript or unpublished edition of the older 9th century version as well. As in the older version, Ferguson's Mergin, son of Shenachan, stumbles across Fergus's grave and calls upon the dead warrior to relate the lost Táin. After failing to stir Fergus's spirit by appealing to his senses of pity, love, and grief, Mergin demands that Fergus awake for sake of song. Not for selfish gods or baubles dares my soul disturb the graves. Love consoles, but song ennobles. Songless men are meat for slaves. Fergus, for the Gael's sake, waken. Never let the scornful Gauls 'mongst our land's reproaches reckon lack of song within our halls. Fergus rose. Mergin's appeal to song, that is, the performance of traditional tales, successfully rouses Fergus's spirit. This hints at the author's views regarding heritage literature. In 1874, Ferguson wrote that medieval Irish texts should be viewed as roots or seeds, and that modern writers might produce a wholly new school of epic and dramatic literature from these despised sources. Revivalist adaptations do exactly this, and Ferguson's words anticipate the Irish revival proper, usually reckoned to begin around 1890. Unlike Martin, Yeats, and many other revivalists, Ferguson did not support Irish independence. However, he was unusual among Irish Unionists in desiring a union wherein Ireland and its traditions would be treated as equal to Britain and British culture. In the Táin Quest, Ferguson appears to recognize that achieving such equality may entail significant sacrifice. According to his poem, Mergin spends the night learning the Táin from Fergus and returns to his father to recite it. He then reunites with an unnamed maiden, his lover, who is shocked at how haggard his journey has left him. Mergin admits that he is dying when he tells the maiden, "Life and love I've sold for song, in order to secure fame immortal." Mergin's words allude to Fergus, who retained his legendary status long after death, and to himself, for recovering the Táin and thereby establishing his own legend. He dies shortly after. This association between self-sacrifice and embracing Irish heritage appears in the second revivalist text we are discussing, Edward Martin's 1899 play, Maeve. The plot, though inspired by folk tradition, is Martin's invention. The only borrowing from the Ulster cycle is the figure of Queen Maeve, one of two Maeves in the play, who bears little resemblance to the deeply flawed Medivh of the Táin. Recall that Martin could not read Irish language sources himself, and the Táin was not published in English until 1904. Set in the present and rural County Clare, the play follows Maeve O'Haines, daughter of a disenfranchised native Irish chieftain styled the Prince of Burren. Maeve is due to be married to an English gentleman in a day's time, but can only dwell on her love for the homeland she will be forced to depart. Heavy foreshadowing accompanies her yearning for the romantic past she envisions in the ruin-strewn landscape. An exchange with an enigmatic old woman called Peg demonstrates this mode of storytelling. Peg tells Maeve that the surrounding mountains are the pleasure haunts of many a beautiful ghost, and implies there is another world beneath the local cairn. When asked about Queen Maeve's burial place, Peg responds, "She is here." The comment is literal. Peg is the legendary queen, disguised as the old woman. The audience learns this when, later that evening, Maeve O'Haines describes a vision she experienced after following Peg to the cairn on a previous occasion. She tells her sister that Peg transformed into a tall, fair woman crowned with a golden diadem not so golden as her hair. This phantom of Queen Maeve shows Maeve O'Haines a beautiful spectral man whom thy love hath called to life, but whose hour of dissolution has come because, according to the queen, young Maeve hast killed him by deserting thy chosen way of life, for there are no more who live for beauty. We can view the man in the vision as Irish heritage personified. By marrying an Englishman, Maeve O'Haines will have to cast away her connection to her culture and her traditional land, thus killing her connection to her heritage and burying part of herself. In the end, Maeve escapes her impending marriage by dying mysteriously. This leaves her soul free to join Queen Maeve and the other phantoms in the world beneath the cairn. As Mergen died for what Ferguson called song, Maeve dies for a beauty of an Ireland free of English influence. Some aspects of the play resemble Yeats and Lady Gregory's infamous 1902 Kathleen Ní Houlihan, with Peg in the place of Kathleen and Maeve O'Haines in the place of the revolutionary Michael. Yeats later wondered whether Kathleen Ní Houlihan, with its thinly veiled call to fight for Irish independence, helped spark the deadly events of Easter 1916. By the time Yeats wrote our final text, The Only Jealousy of Emer, the Irish political landscape had radically transformed. The armed insurrection against British control in Dublin, known as the Easter Rising, and its bloody aftermath, left Yeats questioning the cost of Irish independence. He also became preoccupied with the future of the Anglo-Irish ascendancy, which, like Ferguson, he identified with on intellectual and cultural grounds. Yeats had long envisioned the ascendancy as leading an independent Ireland, but with the executions of the Rising's leaders in 1916 and the Irish Republican Army's razing of Anglo-Irish big houses in 1919, the possibility of such a future became increasingly doubtful. In The Only Jealousy of Emer, Yeats's Cuchulainn encapsulates these anxieties. The play is based on the medieval wasting sickness of Cuchulainn, for which Yeats depended on Augusta Gregory's Cuchulainn of Merthevna, and it also connects to Yeats's earlier play, On Ballia's Strand, in which Cuchulainn kills his own son. Driven mad by this event, Cuchulainn attempts to fight the sea and drowns. The Only Jealousy of Emer picks up after these events, opening inside a fisherman's hut. Cuchulainn's body lies unmoving, dressed in grave clothes and attended by his wife, Emer, and his mistress, Ethna Ingepa. His ghost, played by another actor, stands apart, unperceived by all but the audience. The sense of the uncanny is heightened by Yeats's experimental borrowings from Japanese no theater. The actors wear stylized masks, and dance is incorporated throughout. In terms of the story, one significant difference between the play and its source is that in the medieval text, the body and soul are never separated. The wasting sickness that gives the medieval narrative its title results from Cuchulainn experiencing a dream in which he is beaten by two women of the Sheath, the Irish otherworld. Even though this beating is explicitly referred to as a vision, it incapacitates him for a year. After recovering, he physically travels to an otherworld location, where he wins the affection of Fan, one of the women from his vision. When Fan and Ever, or Emer, vie for Cuchulainn's affections, their interaction takes place in a single material reality. In contrast, Yeats's play splits Cuchulain's body and soul into two distinct figures, in two distinct worlds. This is significant given what Cuchulain represents. Susanna Ballas argues convincingly that this Cuchulain is the embodiment of Yeats's ideals of the Anglo-Irish aristocracy, and that his degradation reflects the violence that surrounded the Anglo-Irish during the Anglo-Irish War, the loss of the Rising's leaders, and the death in 1918 of Augusta Gregory's son Robert, who for Yeats epitomized the values of the ideal hero and those of the spiritual aristocracy. Cuchulain's weakened body represents the material decline of the Anglo-Irish, while his ghost signifies spiritual vulnerability. Only Emer is granted the ability to perceive Cuchulain's ghost as a she-woman standing in for the medieval fan, tempts the ghost to join her and become part of her world. Emer strikes a bargain with a separate she character to bring her husband back into his body, but in exchange, she promises to give up Cuchulain's love and any hope of a future with him. Thus, when Cuchulain's spirit returns to his body, he seeks the embrace of his mistress, Ethna. Given that Emer was to lose Cuchulain to either the she-woman or to Ethna, we must question why she chose the latter. That reason, I argue, is that this play values life. Emer sacrifices her personal happiness for the greater good. She does not bargain away her life like Mergen or Maeve O'Haines, but instead restores the life of her husband, and thus rekindles a symbol of hope, a hero, with the potential to unite the Irish in this life. As an unfaithful husband, Cuchulain is demonstrably imperfect, but his symbolic value outweighs his personal faults. Having experienced the heavy toll of the Rising and subsequent events, Yeats's message in this play rejects further martyrdom and calls instead for selfless acts which preserve life and foster cultural unity. In each of these stories, notice that the phantoms take very little action themselves. Rather, encounters with them inspire the living, who then make decisions which further the plot. Like Mergen, Maeve, and Emer, it is up to us to decide how to respond to encountering our own traditions, our very own phantoms of the past. How we respond to these encounters may enable us to achieve fame, find peace, or inspire hope. Now that I've introduced you to several such phantoms, what decisions will you make? Thank you.